A demonstration of how postmillennialism skews the minds of Christians into looking at what is really going on in the world today. Now, this postmillennialism from this particular group of postmillennialists, Jeff Durbin, the Gary DeMars, the Kenneth L. Gentrys, the apparently David Bahnsen, uh, these groups of postmillennialists are also, they couple their false postmillennialism with an equally fallacious and even more fallacious view called partial preterism or high partial preterism. That is, they view that the vast majority of the events in the book of Revelation took place in and around the events uh, regarding the temple destruction and the destruction of the city of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the 3.5 years leading up to the temple destruction and destruction of the city of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So they couple their high partial preterism with postmillennialism. Now these people will tout Jonathan Edwards as the postmillennialist extraordinaire. What they will not tell you, however, is that Jonathan Edwards was not a preterist. Jonathan Edwards was not a preterist. Postmillennialist, yes, he was wrong on that. He was wrong on his interpretation of Revelation chapter 20. And if you'll notice, these people will never go to Revelation chapter 20. That's the only place we have mention of the millennium, and they avoid it like the plague. It's unbelievable to listen to these people constantly make the same mistakes over and over and over again. So the postmillennial view is the optimistic view. There's no question about it. Every other view is much more pessimistic about eschatological issues. The amillennial view, again, depending if you couple the amillennial view with high partial preterism, you still might have a pessimistic view. But if you couple amillennialism with historicism, like the Reformation did, and I'm not an amillennial, so they were wrong there, but they did not couple amillennialism with preterism or futurism, dispensational futurism or otherwise. They coupled amillennialism with historicism, which is what I am. I'm with them. I'm with the Reformation. Jeff Durbin, David Bahnsen, Gary DeMar, Kenneth Jedrick, they are not with the Reformation on this. That's why the Westminster Confession of Faith, the Americanized, updated version, had to be changed. They had to omit certain key elements of that Confession of Faith. A very important element. So you got at least five views on the millennium. The amillennial view, of course, the postmillennial view, historic premillennialism, this would be like Dr. John Gill was an historic premillennialist. So he was one of those few Reformation writers, post-Reformation writers, that was actually pre-mill. He was not dispensational pre-mill, however. He was an historicist premillennialist, and that's the view I take. Historicism, not preterism, not dispensational futurism. I do not take the historic pre-mill view, however. They were wrong in a certain area. And they make the same mistake that dispensational premillennialists make as well, and that is they have the reign of Christ being on the earth for the 1,000 years. It is not on the earth, it is actually in heaven, while the earth is void and desolate of all life except for Satan and his angels for the 1,000 years. The heavenly premillennial view. That's the view that I take. This is the proper view. This is what God's word teaches, the heavenly premillennial view. But postmillennialism, being a hybrid of amillennialism, not the other way around, sees the millennium of Revelation chapter 20 as symbolic of the New Testament church age as well. Okay, that's the similar to amillennialism part. However, it has not necessarily begun yet, whereas amillennialists say it did begin way back in the 1st century AD. Most of them will say that. In fact, postmillennialists hold that eventually more and more people groups and nations throughout the world will come to saving faith in the gospel of Christ, and that peace and prosperity will begin more and more to dominate human life on earth. Then the millennium will begin. The world will prosper even further until the second advent of Christ. You see how glorious this is? It's so optimistic. What's the problem? No mention of the Antichrist No mention of the earth beast that enforces the mark of the sea beast. Okay? It's not the sea beast, it's not the Antichrist that enforces the mark. It's the Antichrist who comes up with the mark. It's the earth beast of Revelation 13 that enforces it. Moving on, just as amillennialists have a pessimistic view of events in Bible prophecy to occur before the second advent of Christ, for example, judgment, plagues, wrath of God poured out, etc., postmillennialists have a very optimistic view regarding the events that will lead up to the second advent. Postmillennialism is great coupled with high partial preterism. Because then they don't have to worry about the judgment that is coming and the plagues and the wrath of God being poured out. They're not really worried too much about that. And that is, of course, their blindness and deception. Their blindness and deception. It should be noted that many postmillennialists today are also, high preterists or high partial preterists, believing that the majority of the events of the book of Revelation depict events surrounding the destruction of the city of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. Which, by the way, Jonathan Edwards did not hold this view. Let's see. High preterists are not looking for Antichrist throughout the history of the church, but only in the 1st century AD, fulfilled in, for example, Caesar Nero. Therefore, check this out. Far from the idea that Christ will come back to an increasingly godless and fallen world, postmillennialists maintain that when Christ returns, he will come back to the majority of human creatures raising their hands and voices to him in praise and worship. Which is not what the Bible depicts happens at the second advent of Christ, by the way. Not at all. Not at all. He will send out his reaping angels, and they will slay all the wicked who are living at the time. Then, of course, he will raise his people in glory. He will resurrect them to glory. He will change his living people who have lived through these plagues and the slaying of the wicked and glorify them, and they will all be caught up together to meet the Lord in the air, where he will bring us to the place where he has been preparing a place for us. That is, in heaven, the heavenly millennium for 1,000 years. That has not happened yet. That happens at the second advent. The millennium begins at the second advent. Revelation chapter 19 depicts the second advent. Revelation chapter 20 tells us what is the result of the second advent. Historic premillennialism, okay. So I do go into all these views in another video, but just wanted to break down the postmillennialist view here a little bit. And then against doomsdayism. So we're going to have David Bahnsen talking here. There is a reason for Christians to be concerned, but their concern should come from knowledge. Okay? I think Hosea 4:6 talks about, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So what David Bahnsen wants to say is, there's no reason to be so alarmist in American society and these things with your money and inflation and all that stuff. And then he has the audacity to talk about the fact that he says he believes in the, check this wording out, he believes in the animating spirit, not of God, who is the alone animating spirit, but he believes in the animating spirit of the free market, of free enterprise, as he calls it. So that's the nonsense that's the delusion of the postmillennial mindset.
This just got dropped, August 23rd, 2022. You may recognize David Bahnsen from his many appearances on national media, Fox News, Fox Business. Here is a recent example.
I saw your piece titled Against Doomsdayism. Why did you feel compelled to write that? Why do we need to hear that right now?
Yeah, I added a segment to my daily market commentary. So inside the dctoday.com, there's a piece called Against Doomsdayism. And I'll tell you why I had to do it, because too many people have adopted the religion of doomsdayism, both left and right. I happen to be a movement conservative guy, but I hear too much pessimism and doomsday talk from my friends on the right as well, Charles. The world is not ending. People use it as a sort of therapeutic medicine. It's a coping mechanism for them to feel negative all the time. It goes against the facts of history. It goes against the reality of the great blessings that God has given us that we're living in right now. And ultimately, economically, pessimism never pays. You have points in time where traders can make money being pessimistic, but long term, I want to be long humanity. I believe in the animating spirit of free enterprise and the capabilities God.
The animating spirit, not of God, of the free enterprise, or what he fallaciously refers to as the free enterprise, or free market capitalism, if you will. That's most likely what he's talking about. So by the way, the animating spirit is the animating breath of God that exists in every creature. Okay, every creature is only living. Every living soul, every living creature right now is only living because they have the animating breath of God, the animating spirit of God. That's what makes a living creature, in fact, a living creature and not a dead one. Okay, when a creature dies, the animating breath that was within them returns to God who gave it. That animating breath returns to God who gave it when somebody dies. That's what happens. Christians or the wicked, redeemed or non-redeemed, that's what happens to every creature that dies. Okay? That is the animating breath of God, not free markets or free market capitalism. I mean, this is talk about borderline idolatry. Borderline idolatry. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not trying to just, slam somebody here or even slander them. Okay? But this is idolatrous speak. The animating spirit of the free market. Unbelievable. So let's see how free American, and I'm in the United States, and we're all in the United States. David Bahnsen, Jeff Durbin. So let's just look at our country. Okay, our country is the dominant hyperpower in the world. There's nobody that compares to us militarily, politically, and economically. And our economy, specifically the US dollar, is thoroughly enmeshed with pretty much every nation on the planet. Okay, there are maybe 3 nations that are, sort of ultra isolationist. Okay, there's only 3 countries: North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela. I think Venezuela is the 3rd. Used to be 5 nations, now it's down to 3. And that's because of one of the reasons, of course, is because of the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement, which made the US dollar the world's reserve currency. The world's reserve currency in 1944 in the Bretton Woods Agreement. Of course, that came as a result of World War II. Team America World Police came in and we said, okay, these are our stipulations. Our US dollar is the world's reserve currency. So, and of course, that's the US dollar as we have it today was established in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act. Okay, that's when we lost our country. When we signed over our economic and monetary policy to an independent private banking cartel, okay, known as the Federal Reserve. There's nothing federal about it, nor do they have any reserves. I'd like to see an audit of Fort Knox with all the gold that was stolen from the American people by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, stolen from the American people, extorted from the American people, and supposedly stored in Fort Knox, where we're supposed to have an audit, I think, every 2 years, and I don't think they've ever done one. But let's see what happens in the U.S. when the U.S. runs the world, because we rule the world. Without the United States, there is no NATO. No such thing as NATO without the United States. Without the United States, there is no such thing as the United Nations. We are the United. We are the United Nations. Okay, they tried it after World War I, called the League of Nations. Most Americans wanted to go home and remain isolationist, from Europe especially. Okay, so the League of Nations failed. They had to have another war, 20-year armistice. Really, World War I and World War II obviously were the same war with just a 20-year armistice in between. But let's see the U.S. This is from Scripture, Proverbs 22 verse 7. See, and I highlighted it there for you. The borrower is the slave of the lender. The borrower is the slave of the lender. That has to do with monetary issues, economics, doesn't it? Borrowing and lending. That's banking system kind of talk. The borrower is slave of the lender. So let's see how much we've borrowed. U.S. national debt clock. 30 trillion, 871 billion, and hundreds of millions in change. 30 trillion with a T. Just to give you some perspective, in 2001, when George Walker Bush took over office, we had about 4.5 trillion in national debt. In 8 years, he doubled it to 9 trillion. Barack Obama takes over in 2009. $9 trillion debt he inherits. He doubles it again to 18 trillion in just another 8 years. Okay, we had 4 years of Don John, and we're going to have 4 years of Sleepy Joe. And I'm thinking we'll be up around the $36 trillion mark at the end of Sleepy Joe's first term. Okay, we're on our way, 30 trillion. But again, 2001, it was 4.5 trillion. You see how this was working? Especially when you have the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. No, the American market is not gonna, it may suffer a little bit, but other countries are suffering way more than we are. But here's the reason for that. Here's why America will come out on top, the United States. And it's not for a good reason. Because as we study these, we see a beast rising up out of the sea. This is the Antichrist. And the Antichrist, the sea beast, which means it's an empire. A beast means an empire, not a single solitary individual human being. The Antichrist is not, I repeat, not a single solitary individual human being. He will not be a single solitary individual human being. And he was not in 70 AD, Caesar Nero, a single solitary individual human being. Although, when did Nero die? I got to look up his death date. But anyway, a beast means an empire. And this, of course, is also the scarlet harlot of Revelation chapter 17. This is the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. This is also the man of sin, son of perdition of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. This is the Roman papal church. Believe me or no, that's not my job to make you believe anything. Okay? That's not my job. My job is to promulgate the truth against errors, falsehoods, and lies of people like David Bahnsen and Jeff Durbin. The beast was giving a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words, again parallel with the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. It was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. See, the preterists look at that as a literal 3.5 years, and they throw it way back in time into about 70 AD, or the 3.5 years leading up to 70 AD. The futurists take this 42 months literally, just like the preterists do, as a 3.5 years, still yet in the future, when a single solitary individual Antichrist will arise. Historicists do not. My Protestant forefathers do not. The 42 months, 1260 days, is supposed to be interpreted using the day equals year principle. The day equals year principle. The time of the Antichrist was 1260 literal years, and it started in about the early part of the 6th century AD, and it ended in the latter part of the 18th century AD. The latter part of the 18th century, so the latter 1700s. And of course, that is when it received its deadly wound, which has been healing ever since in the late 18th century. But around the time the Antichrist, papal Rome, received its deadly wound, another beast rose up out of the earth. Now the sea, as the sea beast, has to do with a densely populated area. A densely populated area. The earth has to do with a sparsely populated area. A sparsely populated area. This is another beast. It is not a different manifestation of the sea beast. Okay, John Gill made a mistake here when he thought the earth beast was just a different manifestation of the sea beast whose wound was healed. Okay, he was wrong on that. This is clearly another beast. Just like in Daniel chapter 7, where we have another beast, lion with eagle's wings, another beast, a bear raised up on one side, 3 ribs in its mouth, another beast, a leopard with eagle's wings. Another beast. Okay, these are not different manifestations of the same beast. These represent different empires. The Babylonian Empire, followed by the Medo-Persian Empire, followed by the Grecian Empire, followed by the Roman Empire. This beast right here is the United States. It rose up from a sparsely populated area at around the time of the latter 18th century, when the sea beast, the Antichrist, was receiving its deadly wound at the hands of Napoleon's armies. This beast, the earth beast, that is the United States, had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. That is like Satan. Okay? Makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. This is where we are headed. We are headed with the earth beast, the United States, causing all to worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. And it does this by way of deception, deceiving those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast, the sea beast, that was wounded by the sword, that is by military means, and yet lived. That's what happens when Berthier went into papal Rome and usurped Pope Pius VI and took the papal states for the French Empire. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Now notice this. Here's the earth beast right here. Here's the United States. Causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, which is a spiritual mark, by the way. It has nothing to do with RFID chips or anything. This is all spiritual stuff. See, this is about worship. Worship, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. So, when we hear of people talking optimistically about the United States stock market, which is, I think, what he's focused on here, it seems like in context, he's focused on the American stock market. I'd say, no, you don't have a lot to be concerned about. I mean, certain stocks might fall and certain ones might rise. I mean, if you had Amazon stock before COVID, and if you bought a lot of Amazon stock before COVID, your stock nearly doubled. Okay? By the way, Amazon just, I think about a month ago, had a 20-for-1 stock split. 20-for-1, not 3-for-1, not 7-for-1, not 12-for-1, a 20-for-1 stock split. Pretty amazing stuff. But anyway, U.S. national debt, $30 trillion. Again, American investors, the United States isn't going anywhere. Dispensational futurists think the United States is going, bye-bye someday, because after a pre-tribulation rapture, so many Christians will apparently be raptured up that the United States will just falter as a country. I tell you nay. As an historicist, right here, this is huge. The day for year principle, 42 months. This is huge. The little horn, time times half a time, is the same time, 1260 days, 42 months. Okay, that's very important to understand. So that's all I wanted to say on that. Your postmillennialism, here, let's go like this. Let's do this one more time, because I just want to go back. This is the last church age. Okay, this is Revelation chapter 3, by the way. So go to Revelation chapter 2. We start the various seven churches. Okay, Revelation chapter 3. This is the church age we're living in right now. These are 7 church ages. Okay, we are living in the age of the church in Laodicea. Notice, you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold. Okay, I will spit you out of my mouth. Again, this has nothing to do with their condemnation. This is the church. The church is saved. Period. Okay? This has to do with doctrine and how we are looking at, for example, God's prophetic word. When we have all these erroneous teachings out there, preterism, dispensational futurism, postmillennialism, amillennialism, dispensational premillennialism, all these falsehoods, errors that are being promulgated as if they were true. Lukewarmness, neither hot nor cold, spew you out of my mouth. For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing, not realizing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold, that is, good doctrine, refined by fire, so that you may be rich, and white garments, so that you may clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness may not be seen, and salve to anoint your eyes, you blind fools, so that you may see. Those whom I love, notice, here's the key. Verse 19, that's why I highlighted it here in green. Those whom I love, I reprove and discipline. Okay? He's saying this in love. Okay? This reproof, this discipline, he's saying it in love. He's not saying this to unbelievers. This is not being said to unbelievers. This is being said to the church. Okay? The last church age of Laodicea. That's the one we are living in now. And maybe let's just play one more little clip of Bahnsen. No, maybe we'll be done for right now. There's a lot more that could be said on the nonsense of the postmillennial view, coupled with the high partial preterism, so much more. I have videos on preterism versus futurism and all that. You can check those out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And we'll talk to you soon, Lord willing. Soli Deo Gloria.